Derek Stewart, don't reach into your bag. Keep your hands where I can see them.
All right. What's going on? I'm just heading home.
Every move Derek Stewart made for the last 15 months was being recorded. He is seconds away from finding that out, along with the fact that he is walking out of this building with nearly $700,000 in stolen mail on his person.
We've been tracking missing checks from this facility, and we need to know what you're carrying.
It's just my work stuff, that's all.
He would not get the chance to explain. Within 90 minutes, federal agents would log nearly 200 pieces of mail recovered from his pockets, his waistband, and the inside of his jacket. More than $700,000 in checks, endorsed in other people's names, carried out of a federal postal facility in broad daylight. 15 months of theft, captured on cameras he had walked past every single shift, and an ATM that recorded his face every time he cashed out. Before we go any further, would you trust the person standing between you and your mail? The clerk, the carrier, the supervisor who handles your refund check, your tax return, your kid's birthday card with a 20 in it? Drop a comment and tell me how much you actually think about that. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. This channel covers the people who got handed that trust and decided to monetize it. Derek Stewart was born in 1991 in West Baltimore, the second of 3 children. His mother worked the third-shift housekeeping rotation at Sinai Hospital on Belvedere Avenue. His father drove a yellow cab out of the Penn Station stand for 22 years and came home smelling like Marlboro Reds and gasoline. The Stewart family rented a 2-story row house on North Bentaloo Street with a marble stoop the neighbors took turns sweeping. There was always mail on the kitchen counter when Derek was a kid. His mother sorted it Sunday afternoons at the table, separating bills from solicitations, stacking the Social Security envelopes for his grandmother in a neat pile by the toaster. He grew up watching mail be something you respected, something you handled carefully because somebody's name was on it. He attended Frederick Douglass High School on Gwynns Falls Parkway and graduated in 2009 with a B- average and a part-time job bagging groceries at the Shoppers Food Warehouse on Reisterstown Road. His guidance counselor wrote in his senior file that he was a polite young man, dependable, with a strong work ethic, but limited academic ambition. 2 of his uncles worked for the Postal Service. One ran a route in Park Heights. The other worked the night sort at the Fayette Street Annex. They told him the same thing at every cookout. Federal job, good benefits, pension, stay clean, take the test, you'll be set for life. He took the postal exam in the spring of 2011. He was 20 years old. He scored in the high 80s on the basic clerk battery and was offered a mail processor position at the Baltimore Processing and Distribution Center on Fayette Street that same August. Starting wage in 2011 for a Postal Service mail processing clerk was $19.23 an hour. His mother cried at the kitchen table when he came home with the offer letter. His father took him to the Lexington Market for a crab cake to celebrate. Derek raised his right hand at the orientation, swore the oath, signed the conduct acknowledgement, and reported for his first shift the following Monday in dark blue trousers and a light blue postal shirt his mother had ironed flat that morning. For the first 10 years, he was unremarkable. His personnel file from that period reads like thousands of others across the country. Performance reviews used phrases like consistently meets expectations, reliable attendance, and works well within established procedures. His supervisor in 2014 noted he was quiet but cooperative and shows familiarity with sorting machine workflow. In 2016, he was praised for flexibility in covering overtime during peak holiday volume. He bid into a steady tour, swing shift, 3 a.m. to 11 a.m., and worked it for 6 years. He married a woman named Andrea in 2015 at a small ceremony at the Silburn Arboretum. They had a daughter in 2017 and moved into a brick row house off Liberty Heights Avenue. He coached her t-ball team 2 summers in a row at the Hanlon Park Field. No one at the processing center described him as ambitious. No one described him as a problem either. He clocked in. He worked his station. He clocked out. He picked up his daughter from aftercare at 3:45 every weekday. He drove an 8-year-old Nissan Altima with a cracked rear bumper. He paid his bills on time. He filed his taxes through H&R Block. His credit score in 2021 was a 598. He was 31 years old, 11 years into a federal job, and he was struggling. The mortgage on the Liberty Heights house ran $2,100 a month. The Altima needed a transmission. His daughter's daycare ran $400 a week. His take-home pay after taxes, dues, and the FERS contribution was about $3,200 every 2 weeks. He was current on everything and underwater on everything at the same time. The Baltimore Processing and Distribution Center on Fayette Street is one of the largest postal sorting facilities on the East Coast. It moves between 4 and 6 million pieces of mail every single day. Letters, flats, parcels, registered mail, certified mail, government checks, tax refunds, Social Security benefit envelopes, child support disbursements, insurance settlements, personal checks tucked inside birthday cards, business reimbursements, royalty payments, dividend checks. Anything that gets dropped in a blue collection box anywhere between Annapolis and the Pennsylvania line passes through that building before it goes anywhere else. The building runs on a tour system. Tour 1 is the overnight sort, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., when most of the mechanized processing happens. Tour 2 is the day operation, 6 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon. Tour 3 is the swing, 2:30 in the afternoon to 11 at night. Derek worked the back end of Tour 1 and the front end of Tour 2, depending on overtime needs. The volume during his hours was at its peak. The fluorescent lights are on 24 hours a day. The conveyor belts never stop running. The room is loud enough that workers wear ear protection, and most of them keep their heads down and focus on the trays in front of them. A mail processing clerk has access to almost everything. The machines do the heavy lifting, but clerks pull jams, transfer trays between belts, hand sort the pieces the optical scanners can't read, and run the rejection bins where damaged mail goes to be repaired or returned. A clerk standing at a rejection bin at 4 in the morning is looking at the envelopes the machine couldn't process, which often means envelopes that are slightly bulky. Envelopes with a check inside often feel different, slightly heavier, slightly thicker. A clerk who knows what he is looking for can identify a check envelope by feel within half a second. The Postal Service runs internal security through the Office of Inspector General and the Postal Inspection Service. Cameras cover the loading docks, the sorting floor, the corridors, the entrances, the parking lots, and the break rooms. Bag checks are conducted at random. Employees pass through security upon entry and exit. Everything moves on the assumption that the people inside the building are doing their jobs. The system was designed for that assumption. The system depended on it. There is one piece of the building that the cameras do not cover well. The freight elevator on the west side of the facility services, the loading dock, and the upper sorting floor. It is large enough to hold a pallet jack, and the interior of the car has a single mounted camera angle that covers the doors, but leaves a blind quadrant in the rear left corner. Maintenance had logged the gap 3 times over 4 years. The repair work order kept getting pushed. The first envelope he took was on a Tuesday in September of 2022. He was clearing a jam on the secondary sort belt at 4:17 in the morning. The envelope had been processed once by the machine, rejected for a damaged barcode, and routed back to the reject bin. He picked it up and felt the weight of the paper inside. He looked at it for a moment. Then he slid it into the inside pocket of his postal shirt and went back to work. He finished his shift at 6:30. He clocked out, walked to his Altima, drove home, and waited. Nothing happened. No supervisor pulled him aside. No security officer stopped him at the door. No audit flagged the missing envelope. The check inside, when he opened it at his kitchen table later that morning, was a state tax refund made out to a woman in Towson for $1,140. He sat with it for 2 days. Then he opened a savings account at a credit union on Reisterstown Road under his own name. He endorsed the back of the check, signing the woman's name in a careful imitation of a signature he had never seen, then countersigning his own name underneath. He deposited it at the ATM. He waited for the hold to clear. It cleared. The $1,140 hit his account on the 5th business day. He withdrew $600 of it that weekend to catch up on the daycare bill. That was the first one. The second came 2 weeks later, then 3 the week after that, then 6. By December of 2022, he had developed a method. He worked the secondary sort belt and the reject bins during the slow window between 4 and 5:30 in the morning, when the supervisors were doing paperwork and the floor was thinly staffed. He felt the envelopes as he handled them. The ones with checks went into his shirt, his waistband, or the inside of his jacket. When he had 4 or 5 on him, he stepped onto the freight elevator on the west side of the building, rode it up 1 floor and back down, and used the blind corner of the car to consolidate the envelopes into the lining of his coat. By the time the doors opened on the dock level, he looked exactly the way he had looked when he stepped on. He walked out at the end of his shift like every other clerk in the building. The exit checks were random and infrequent. He was never selected, not once in 15 months. He drove home, sorted the mail at his kitchen table, opened the check envelopes, and discarded the rest in a public dumpster 2 miles from his house. He kept a list of which checks he had deposited, where, written on the back pages of a spiral notebook he had bought at a Dollar Tree. He spread the deposits across 4 accounts at 3 different institutions. He never deposited more than 2 checks at the same ATM in the same week. He never deposited at a branch counter. He used the drive-through ATMs at off hours, mostly after 11 at night and before 6 in the morning, wearing a hooded sweatshirt that obscured his face from the upper-mounted cameras. He did not obscure his face from the lower cameras. He did not know there were lower cameras. The scheme escalated. By the spring of 2023, he was pulling between 12 and 20 checks a week. Some were small, a $38 rebate from a utility company, a $112 refund from a retailer. Others were substantial. A $19,000 insurance settlement check made out to a man in Catonsville, an $11,000 tax refund made out to a married couple in Hampton, a $4,700 reimbursement to a small business in Federal Hill. He deposited them all. He forged the endorsements at his kitchen table with a black Pilot G2 pen, using the victim's printed name from the check itself as his only reference. His wife noticed the money first. The Altima got a new transmission in April. He paid in cash. He told her he had picked up extra overtime. In June, he replaced the back deck of the house with composite boards he bought from a Home Depot on Reisterstown Road. $3,400. Cash. In August, he took his daughter and his wife to Ocean City for a long weekend and paid for the hotel and the boardwalk. In 20s, he peeled off a roll he kept in his glove compartment. Andrea asked him once where the money was coming from. He said he had been picking up the holiday detail pay early and the supervisor had let him bank some of it. She did not ask again. He was steady. He was current. The bills got paid. The freezer was full. He was a federal employee with a pension and a daughter in T-ball and a wife who trusted him. No one at the processing center noticed. No one in his neighborhood noticed. The victims, scattered across the Baltimore metropolitan area, noticed at different speeds. Some called the agencies that had issued their checks. Some called the Postal Service to ask where their mail had gone. Some assumed the check was lost and requested a reissue. The complaints landed in different inboxes at different agencies. None of them, individually, looked like the start of a pattern. No one noticed. No one checked. In September of 2023, a year almost to the day after the first envelope, the Postal Service Office of Inspector General opened a formal mail theft inquiry centered on the Baltimore Processing and Distribution Center. The trigger was not a single complaint. It was a clustering pattern. Investigators in the OIG's Mid-Atlantic Field Office had been receiving non-receipt complaints from the Baltimore zip codes at a rate roughly 4 times the regional baseline for 14 consecutive months. Refund checks that never arrived. Insurance settlements that never arrived. Personal checks dropped in collection boxes that never reached their recipients. The volume was too high to be carrier-side losses. The pattern pointed inward, toward the facility itself. The OIG paired with IRS criminal investigation because a significant portion of the missing checks were federal and state tax refunds, which gave the IRS its own jurisdictional stake. The joint task force was small. 3 OIG agents, 2 IRS CI special agents, and an analyst from the Postal Inspection Service's Forensic Laboratory in Dulles, Virginia. They worked the case quietly. The objective was to identify the employee or employees stealing mail without alerting anyone inside the facility, because tipping off a target would mean the theft stopped and the evidence trail went cold. The analyst pulled the bank deposit records associated with the recovered checks. The Postal Service had recovered exactly 19 stolen checks from the broader Baltimore inquiry during the prior 12 months. Of those 19, 7 had been deposited and were traceable through the banking system before they were flagged. The analyst cross-referenced the depositing accounts. 2 of the 7 deposits had been made at the same ATM, a branch of a credit union on Reisterstown Road, in the same week, 4 months apart, into 2 different accounts. We're heading into the part of this story where the cameras start telling on him. If you've made it this far, this kind of coverage needs more eyes on it. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. We don't look away from these stories. Both accounts trace to one address, a brick row house off Liberty Heights Avenue. The deed and the utility records and the credit reports all came back to the same name, Derek Stewart, Postal Service employee, 11 years on the job, mail processing clerk at the Baltimore P&DC. The OIG agents did not move on him for 9 more weeks. They wanted the cameras. They wanted the ATM footage. They wanted the building footage. They wanted to be able to walk a federal grand jury through it frame by frame, and they wanted to catch him with the mail still on his person. The surveillance package agents assembled over the next 9 weeks was meticulous. They pulled 43 separate ATM transactions from 4 banking institutions across the Baltimore metropolitan area. They cross-referenced each transaction against the check images stored by the receiving banks. 41 of the 43 deposits showed a check made out to someone other than Derek Stewart, endorsed in that other person's name, in a handwriting that did not match any known signature exemplar for the victim, and countersigned on the next line by Derek Stewart. The ATM cameras pulled clean. The lower-mounted cameras at the credit union on Reisterstown Road, the ones he had not known about, captured his face on 29 separate occasions. The drive-through cameras at the bank on Northern Parkway captured him in the driver's seat of the Altima 11 more times. His Postal Service uniform was visible in 4 of the deposits. He had stopped on his way home from his shift. The building surveillance at the processing center was harder because it was on a 30-day rolling deletion cycle for non-incident footage. But the agents had been recording continuous floor coverage of the secondary sort area and the freight elevator since the inquiry opened. Over 28 days of targeted surveillance, they documented Derek Stewart entering the freight elevator on the west side of the building 83 times during shift hours. 83. The freight elevator services a single upstairs corridor that the floor he worked on had no operational reason to access. He had no parcel deliveries to make upstairs. He had no equipment to retrieve. The supervisors had no record of dispatching him to the upper floor. He went up and came back down. Every shift. Sometimes 3 times a shift. The forensic lab in Dulles processed the recovered checks. They identified 17 distinct forged signatures, all written in a black Pilot G2 ballpoint. The handwriting analyst documented signature characteristics that matched a known exemplar of Derek Stewart's handwriting, pulled from his Postal Service personnel file, specifically the way he formed the lowercase letter R and the diagonal stroke of his lowercase t. The paper trail tracked exactly to the operation he had been running for 15 months. Mail enters the facility. Mail does not exit through normal channels. Check appears at an ATM, endorsed in a victim's forged name and countersigned by Stewart. Funds clear into one of his 4 accounts. Cash withdrawn within 72 hours. The federal grand jury for the District of Maryland returned a sealed indictment in late November of 2023. The arrest warrant authorized a search of his person upon execution. The OIG agents picked the date, December 2nd, a Saturday, the end of his Friday into Saturday Tour 1 shift. They would take him as he walked out the door. It was 38 degrees at 6:41 in the morning on December 2nd when Derek Stewart walked out of the employee exit on the south side of the Baltimore Processing and Distribution Center. He was wearing his postal issue navy jacket, zipped to the collar, a knit watch cap, and dark blue trousers. His ID badge was clipped to his belt. He had a paper coffee cup in one gloved hand and his car keys in the other. He was walking toward the employee parking lot. 4 OIG agents and 2 IRSCI special agents were waiting for him in the lot, in 2 unmarked sedans. A uniformed Postal Inspection Service officer was positioned at the employee exit behind him. When Stewart cleared the door and stepped onto the asphalt, the lead agent stepped out of the lead sedan and walked toward him with his credentials raised. Derek Stewart, Special Agent Ruiz, USPS Office of Inspector General. We have a federal warrant for your arrest and a warrant authorizing a search of your person. I need you to put the coffee down and put your hands on the hood of this vehicle. Stewart stopped walking. He looked at the agent. He looked at the second agent who had come around behind him. He looked at the uniformed officer at the door. What is this about? Sir, put the coffee down and put your hands on the hood. I haven't done anything. What is this? Sir, hands on the hood, now. He set the coffee cup on the asphalt and placed his palms flat on the warm metal of the sedan. The agent began the search at his shoulders and worked down. The first envelope came out of the inside left pocket of his jacket within 4 seconds. The agent held it up. What is this? Stewart did not answer. The agent reached deeper into the jacket lining. He pulled out a second envelope, then a third, then a folded packet of 8. The second agent began pulling envelopes from the right side of the jacket, then from inside Stewart's waistband, then from a stack tucked against the small of his back, held in place by the elastic of his undershirt. By the time they were finished counting them in the trunk of the sedan, 21 minutes later, the recovered total was 196 pieces of mail. The face value of the checks inside, once cataloged by the forensic team, was $713,482. I want a lawyer, Stewart said. Those were the last words he spoke to the agents. Derek Stewart was indicted by a federal grand jury sitting in Baltimore on 3 counts. Count 1, theft of mail by a postal employee in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1709. Count 2, wire fraud in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1343. Count 3, aggravated identity theft in violation of Title 18 United States Code, Section 1028A, which carries a mandatory consecutive 2-year sentence on top of whatever the underlying offenses receive. His defense attorney, a federal public defender out of the Baltimore office named Marisol Patton, filed the standard motions. A motion to suppress the search incident to arrest, denied because the warrant was valid on its face. A motion to suppress the ATM surveillance, denied because the records had been obtained by subpoena. A motion challenging the handwriting analysis, denied because the methodology was within accepted forensic standards. By the spring of 2026, with the evidence pile against him and no plausible suppression path remaining, Patton negotiated a plea. On May 14, 2026, Derek Stewart stood before United States District Judge Cordelia Brennan in the Edward A. Garmatz Federal Courthouse in Baltimore and pleaded guilty to all 3 counts. The plea agreement contained no cooperation provision. He had acted alone. There was no one to give up. The sentencing hearing was set for September of 2026. The government's sentencing memorandum laid out the loss amount, the duration of the scheme, the number of victims, and the abuse of position of trust enhancement. The total guideline range, with the mandatory consecutive aggravated identity theft count, exposed him to up to 27 years in federal prison. The victims came to the hearing. 7 of them spoke. A retired schoolteacher from Towson, whose $19,000 settlement check had been the difference between staying in her house and moving in with her sister, read a statement that lasted 4 minutes. I worked for 36 years for that money. I trusted the United States Postal Service with it. I trusted you with it. You took it like it was nothing. A small business owner from Federal Hill, a sole proprietor whose $4,700 reimbursement had been earmarked for payroll, told the judge his employees had gone 2 weeks without paychecks because the check Stewart stole had been the operating cushion the business depended on. A young couple from Hampton, whose tax refund had been their down payment savings for their first house, spoke together. The wife was crying. The husband held her hand and finished her sentence. Judge Brennan read her sentencing statement from the bench. Mr. Stewart, what makes this case so corrosive is not the dollar amount, although the dollar amount is significant. What makes this case corrosive is that every single piece of mail that passes through a federal processing facility moves on the trust of the public that the employee handling it will treat it as if it belonged to the person whose name is on the envelope. You took an oath. You wore the uniform. You were a federal employee for over a decade, and you used that position day after day, shift after shift, for 15 consecutive months to steal from your neighbors. You forged their signatures. You used their names. You cashed their checks. You bought a new transmission and a new deck and a beach weekend on the back of a retired teacher who needed that settlement to keep her house. You knew exactly what you were doing. The court declines to credit any argument that economic pressure mitigates the deliberateness of this conduct. She sentenced Derek Stewart to 192 months in federal prison, 16 years, 168 months on counts 1 and 2 to run concurrently, 24 months on count 3, the aggravated identity theft count, to run consecutively as required by statute, 3 years of supervised release to follow, restitution in the full amount of the recovered loss, $713,482, payable to the United States Treasury for distribution to the identified victims. He was remanded into the custody of the United States Marshals Service from the courtroom. He is currently designated to the Federal Correctional Institution at Cumberland, Maryland, a medium security facility about 2 hours west of the city he grew up in. His projected release date, with good time credit, is in 2040. His daughter will be 23 years old. His wife filed for divorce 4 months after the plea. The Baltimore Processing and Distribution Center repaired the camera angle in the freight elevator the week after his arrest. The work order had been open for 4 years. This case was infuriating. But this case on the right-hand side, what this one shows you about how far a uniform can carry someone before the cameras catch up, is on another level entirely. Click it now.